Welcome back to Shit Creek Survivors. We share real stories of getting stuck up Shit Creek, the paddles we use to get out, and hope for anyone stuck up their own creek right now. I'm Cam, and today I'm sitting down with Wesley Farnsworth for an incredibly honest conversation about a struggle that thrives in secrecy, pornography addiction. Wesley shares his journey from being a master chameleon, living a life of codependency and seeking approval while drowning in a hidden struggle. We dive into his turning point, how he found his paddle through Celebrate Recovery, and how he learned to change his stars through faith and community. If you've ever felt like you're losing your identity to a habit or a hang-up, this episode is a roadmap for taking the first steps towards the light. Let's get into it. All right, Wesley, thank you for being here today. It's such a blessing. If you would introduce yourself to us and tell us a little bit about maybe your Shit Creek.
Man, Cam, thank you so much for having me with you today. I've been looking forward to this episode since we first connected. Everyone's got their own creek that they've gone through. Mine is, I grew up a pastor's kid. Excuse me. I grew up a pastor's kid, and with that comes some undue pressure. I bet 99% of it was self-inflicted. There we go. That's a good way to put it. Stuff I put on myself that, you had to act a certain way, do a certain thing, and that type of stuff. And through all of that, my parents were awesome. Everybody was awesome, but I really just began losing myself because I was focused on other people and making sure that I was living up to what I thought they wanted. Gotcha. And as a result of all of that, I now know, many years later, looking back, that I was really developing a spirit of codependency, which, if you're not familiar with the word codependency, that is essentially caring more about what other people think about you than what you think about yourself and what God thinks about you, more importantly. And so I really started developing this codependency where I was like, man, I was so worried about getting the approval of other people that it started informing my decisions. It started informing the way I responded to people, the way I acted around certain people. And I became what I lovingly can refer to myself as the master chameleon. I became very good at blending into just about any environment that I was in. Didn't matter. I could carry on small talk with the best of them, and I just became the master of small talk, really.
Right.
I knew enough about enough things that I could carry a conversation, but if you started to try and get deep in the weeds on stuff, you would lose me, and I would make something up and try and fake it. But as I went on in life, that's where my creek really started. The tip of it formed because when I was a teenager, I was out with some friends from work one day, and we're out and we're joking around, and one of them says something about this term that, and everyone just starts laughing, and they're like, ha 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 ha, and they're carrying on, they're, bantering back and forth, and I'm like trying to jump in and pretend like I know what they're talking about, and I'm laughing and trying to have a good time. And in the meantime, I'm thinking to myself, don't call on me, don't ask me a question, like whatever, don't do, cause I know nothing about what you're talking about. Right. And I didn't want that to be the case if this ever happened again. And so I went home that night and I looked up this term that they had been joking about. And that opened up this world of pornography to me, and adult content. And so as I began researching, if you will, to make sure that I was informed, so should it ever come up, I would have something to base it off of. The research started to become more than research, which started to become more than an interest, which eventually grew up into a full blown addiction. And it ended up being almost a 20-year addiction. And over the years, I tried to stop many, many times, but I was always trying to do it myself. I would always say, I don't have a problem. I can stop whenever I want to. It's not really a big deal. I'm not hurting anybody else. I'm only hurting myself.
Right.
I was doing everything I could to explain it away to justify it.
Right.
Which, if you've ever dealt with any kind of addiction, that's exactly what you do. And so
Yep.
for many, many years, I tried to defeat it myself. And I could never do it. And I would pray and I'd be like, God, please take this from me. I can't do it anymore. I don't want it. Take it from me. Um,
Right.
but I would say that one moment, and then the next moment I would go back to trying to do it myself.
Yeah.
And so while I was giving him control, so to speak, I was never really giving him control. I was
Yeah.
doing the lip service. Um,
And that
and so
tears you apart too when it's
it
happening
does.
because
And
you want to do it like you with full heart. You're like, God, please, and then you find yourself jumping right back into it. I can totally relate with alcohol, with all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
well, see, and that's just it. It doesn't matter what it is, whether it's alcohol, pornography, drugs, food. It doesn't matter what it is. It's the same thing. And that's what
Hmm.
and so for a long time, I just kept going back to it and I was never able to beat it. And so finally, I just kind of was like, I was sitting in church. Now, mind you, at this time, I'm now in my adult life. I'm still going to church every single day, just like I did growing up, or every single Sunday, excuse me. Um, I was very active. I was leading a ministry in the church. And life was going pretty well, for the most part. And I remember going to church one Sunday and they announced from stage that the church was going to be starting this ministry. Um, and it was called Celebrate Recovery. And I was like, what is that?
Hmm.
But then I was like, my brain immediately went, oh, recovery. Well, that's drugs and alcohol. It's not me. Like, whatever, I don't have that issue. But then they started explaining a little bit more about what Celebrate Recovery is. And if you're not familiar with it, I'll give you a quick rundown. A Celebrate Recovery is a Christ-centered 12-step recovery program. Um, we have 12 steps, everything just like you would at AA or NA or SA or any of the other insert letter A here's
Right.
recovery programs. Um, but the difference is all of the other recovery programs essentially allow you to choose your higher power. And Celebrate Recovery, our higher
Hmm.
power is Jesus Christ. And now I hear you saying, okay, but it's for drugs and alcohol. Well, only 1 in 3 people that come to Celebrate Recovery are there for drugs or alcohol. The rest of us are there for life issues. And
Really.
that's what I love about Celebrate Recovery is it's for anything. It can be for
Uh,
overeating. It can be because you hate the color blue. It can be a broken relationship. It can be because you pick your nose. It really doesn't matter what it is. It's for any kind of a life issue, or any hurt, any habit, any hang up. Um,
yeah.
and so they were explaining all of this from stage, and I was like, wow, that sounds pretty cool. Maybe I should check it out. But then again, the codependency side of me started, like, the little devil on my shoulder,
Hmm.
if you want to talk about it that way, was like, no, you can't go because what are they going to think about you? What's going to happen to you? You're going to be, you're going to get told to leave the church. All of these things, that worst case scenarios, just
Oh yeah.
bombarding me left and right. Cause he wanted to keep me in denial. He wanted to keep me in fear, and he being the devil, the enemy.
Hmm.
And if you're stuck in some place, 99% of the time, I'm going to say it's the enemy, um, doing everything he can to keep you there because that's where he has power over you. Um,
Hmm.
and so he was, for a while, for a couple of months at least, I was kind of going back and forth like, man, I should do this. I should, um, and so finally, after a couple of months, I was like, okay, I've tried to beat this thing for so long on my own. Like
Hmm.
something has to change. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to go. I'm going to go check this meeting out, just see what it is. And so I pulled into the parking lot and I sat in the parking lot, and this weight came over me and it was like, I don't want to go in there,
Hmm.
and everything that I'd been hearing, all those lies the enemy had been telling me was just come flooding back in. And it took me a couple of minutes before I was like, okay, I'm going to go in. And I told myself, I'm going to go in, I'm going to sit in the back row. I'm going to
Hmm.
participate. It's not a circle of chairs like you would see in the movies. When you think of AA, it's
Right.
not this big circle of chairs in this dark dungeon of a basement.
Right.
So I went in and I sat in the back row and I said, I'm going to go in, I'm going to go through the meeting, and then I can leave, and then I can say that I tried it and it wasn't for me. Was giving
Yeah.
myself an out. But I went in, I participated in the large group, and I was like, okay, this is actually pretty cool. Like, I could see coming back, and then so I was like, okay, I'll stick around for this 101 class that they have, where they kind of tell you more about the ministry, what you can expect every week, that type of stuff. I was like, okay, I'll go. And now, normally there's multiple newcomers every week. For whatever reason, that week I was the only newcomer, and
Mm-hmm.
that plays into the story because during 101, time permitting, the leaders will say, "What brought you in tonight?" And I sat there and I was like, "Well, I don't want to admit like what
Mm-hmm.
actually brought me in." And so then my mind goes, "Oh, codependency." Now, mind you, I didn't know what codependency was until that night when I had heard it, somebody else explain it from the stage.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was like, well, that seems, not bad, not too bad. So I was like, codependency. And he was like,
Mm-hmm.
okay. He's like, cool. Thanks for sharing. And he reaches over and he starts to pick up. I can still picture it clear as day. He reaches over, starts to pick up the leader's binder, and he stops dead in his tracks and he looks back at me and he says, "Is there anything else?" Now, I can tell you from experience, because I'm a leader in Celebrate Recovery now, that that's not in the script anywhere. That he had no reason to ask this question, except for it had to have been a prompting from God. And he said, "Is there anything else?" And before I knew it, I was blurting out the secret and bawling and weeping
Mm-hmm.
and blurting out this thing that I'd been carrying for 20 years,
Yeah.
that I had not told a single soul. Um,
Was it just like an
and
explosion
it,
of
it
just like, like
Yeah,
just
it was
got to get it out of me kind of deal?
it was like one of those, like, I was blurting it out, and it was like it happened, and then I was like, "Wait, no!" Like, you're reaching, trying
Yeah.
to grab it and bring it
Yep.
back. And then it blurts out, and I'm like just bracing myself now for everything that the enemy had been telling me was going to happen. I'm
Mm-hmm.
waiting for him to look at me in disgust. I'm waiting for him to look at me in shame and to tell me I need to leave the building and like all these things.
Yeah.
And what ended up happening was the exact opposite. Instead of shame, I was looked at with love, and just instead of being told I need to leave, I was just saying, he said, verbatim, "Thank you for your trust. That
Mm-hmm.
you're a brave man for admitting that." And it was in that moment that every lie that the enemy had been telling me was defeated, and
Mm-hmm.
this switch in my head was flipped. And my road to recovery really began. And now I'm just over 6 years clean. And it
Awesome.
has been just this journey of learning more and more every single day. Somebody gets up and shares their testimony. I'm still very active in the ministry, as I said. And every time somebody gets up and shares their testimony and they're talking, I was like, hey, I can relate to that. Or, man,
Mm-hmm.
I never thought about it that way. And it gives you something else to kind of unpack in your own life.
Oh, yeah.
And so it's a constant journey of learning. Um, and so as I began working through these steps and I started working my recovery, um, about 4 years ago or so, I started, actually, it was about 2019, 2020. I started sharing my testimony and Celebrate Recovery. Um, I'd worked through the 12 steps, and I got to the point now where I could share my testimony and I could talk about it. And I started doing that.
Mm-hmm.
And I was getting good feedback left and right. So I was like, okay, cool. So I started going to other Celebrate Recoveries and sharing my testimony and sharing the things that God had done and how He has helped me beat this addiction and everything. And it was around then that I was sitting there. This was 2019. I was sitting there and somebody shared their testimony. And this, I'm like, kind of get to where I am now. He shared his testimony and he said something, and I wish for the life of me I could remember exactly what it was he said. But after our large group, we went into our open share groups and we started talking about the testimony. And whatever he said kind of spurred this scene from a movie, A Knight's Tale, in my head. It's like the scene just started playing over and over again. And in this scene, the knight is parading down the road in his full armor. It's all glistening, everything. He looks, all majestic and regal and all those fun things. And there's a
Yeah.
little boy on the side of the road, and he's like, "I want to be like him one day," to his dad. And his dad, of
Hmm.
course, is like, "Yeah, you can do that," And the guy nearby is like, "You're nuts. You can't change your stars." He just knocks him down, puts him in his place right there. You're just a peasant boy. You can't do that.
Right.
And as the scene started replaying in my head, God began to take those words, and He started to manipulate them and rearrange the thought process of that scene in my head. And He said, when you're not saved, or you're defeating, or you're working on this addiction, you are like that peasant boy on the side of the road. But when you finally give this addiction over to me, and you finally accept me, and become, a part of my family, you accept Jesus as Christ, then you do transform, you do change your stars, and you go from that peasant boy now into royalty. You become that knight. You're a part of my kingdom. Um, and so that just start playing over and over and over again in my head. And so as I began meditating on that, after a couple of years, it started to shift, and the idea of just changing your stars really became kind of a theme in my head, a theme in my life. Um, and to the point where a few years ago, God was like, it's like, I now want you to take your testimony, and I would really want you to share it with a larger audience. And I'm like, okay. Like, so I start reaching out to more Celebrate Recoveries and stuff. And he's like, no, 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 no. He's like, you're going to do a book. And I was like, you want me to do what? you know,
Yeah.
and this idea of the stars started to play out in the book, as the theme for it. Because if you ever think about nautical times, sailors, when they're out on the water, if all else fails, they use stars to navigate their
Hmm.
ship. And he's like, your life is like a constellation of stars. Every decision that you make, every job that you hold, every relationship that you have, everything is a star in your constellation. What is your
Hmm.
North Star? If the North Star is Christ, then you're gonna be able to navigate your life, or your ship, if you will, through through the waters, and you'll stay on course with what He wants for you, what Christ wants for you, what God wants for you in your life. But the moment you let something else become that brightest star and take over that North Star, your ship starts to go off course. Your life
Hmm.
begins to go off course. And so in my book, The Blueprint of Becoming: A Practical Guide to Faith, Failure, and Finding Your Way Forward, um, that's what I talk about. I share the first couple of chapters. I just share my heart. I share my testimony, things that
Hmm.
I've gone through in my life, how God has provided, and everything else. Um, and then that we start getting into like biblical stories of people that God used despite their past, that the world would be like, you can't do that. You're not qualified for that. There's no way. Go away.
Yeah.
You old man, or whatever. But
Hmm.
God's like, no, no, it's you I want. Let's go. And they say yes to God, and God uses them in really big ways. And now there's stories that we say every single day, that
Hmm.
if you ever grew up in or out of the church, you probably at least know the basis of the stories.
Hmm.
Um, Murderers and adulterers and all these things that God used. So we look at some of those stories, and then I give practical tips as to how you can examine your own life and begin to make changes, and some tools that you can use to do that. Um, and one of those tools that I like to talk about is the importance of community. Because when I was
Hmm.
going through my addiction, community played a huge role in defeating it. When I wanted when I wanted to go back to something, I needed somebody to be able to call. In recovery, we
Hmm.
call those people our accountability team or our sponsors. But they're your community. They're the people that you call when crap hits the fan, and or
Yeah.
you're starting to paddle up against shit creek, and you're like, like
Hmm.
like pull me out. Like, I don't want to go down this river anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And so I gave you some tips as to how you can do that because the community plays such an important role. And so, you know, I can imagine somebody sitting there like, yeah, I don't have a community though. Well,
Mm-hmm.
there's community out there. You just have to be willing to find it.
Yeah.
You know, and that's where I'm like, go to a recovery meeting, you know, in Celebrate Recovery, we say, come and give us, 6 weeks, give us 6 meetings, 7 meetings, whatever it is. If you don't like it, we'll give you your misery back, cause
Mm-hmm.
you have to find the community that will support you and allow you to be real and just be transparent with, and will love you despite what you're going through.
Yeah.
And there's people out there that will do that. Well, the same thing is true about the book. As you're going through my book, you can do it yourself, and that's great. I encourage you to do so, but it works better if you do it in community, because as you're
Mm.
going through the book, God's going to start to open things up in your head and your mind, and you're going to be like, oh man, that's what I need to change. And so I encourage people to go through it as a community group, as a small group, whether it be friends or through your church or whatever it is, because now as you're going through things, you can be like, yo, this is what came to mind. And now
Mm-hmm.
you're sharing with friends, and friends are sharing with you. And now you have that community aspect right there. You have
Yep.
instant accountability team that you can support, and they can support you. And likewise. So if you go out to my website, wesleyfarnsworth.com/start, I actually have a free guide for my book that you can download there. There's a leader's guide and a participant's guide that takes you through my book, and turns it into a 10-week study.
Oh, cool.
And you can go through it chapter by chapter and just be there to support each other and encourage each other as you begin reorienting your life or your ship to the
Mm-hmm.
to the proper North Star. Um, and so as I've been going through all of this, I'm like, okay, like I got the book out. The book came out October 14th of this year. And I was like, okay,
Congratulations.
thank you. And so I was like, okay, God, like I'm done. Like we did it. Like and he's like, okay, now we're going to go further. I'm like, I'm going to do what? He's like, now we're
Mm-hmm.
going to take it further. And I want you to start doing podcasts, like start telling more people. I was like, well, fine. So
Yeah.
I start opening the door, and I start going out looking for, like, I don't even know how do I find a podcast to be on? Like, so I
Mm-hmm.
just start one day. I was like, okay, I just sit down on the internet and I start randomly finding these sites that I can message podcast hosts on and stuff. And I was like, okay, fine. Start sending out some messages, not expecting anybody to get back because they don't know me from Adam, all this stuff. And doors just start opening, and I'm like, oh, okay. So now I'm like 2 months in now, and I've done 20 plus interviews that,
Oh, wow.
and so I'm like, okay, all right, God, all right, I'm doing this, let's do it. And so I started doing these interviews, and I'm at church one Sunday, and he's like, okay, he's like, now I want you to start speaking. Like, you want me to do what? I want you to start speaking. Like, see your pastor up there? I want you to start speaking on stages. And he at one point, he actually gave me this vision where I'm like standing in this arena full of people speaking. And I'm like scared out of my mind because I'm not a public speaker. I've always had this fear of public speaking, which is kind of funny because my career is in public relations. And, but I'm like, but he's like, yeah, you're, and I was like, no, so for a week I fought with him, and I was like, no, I can't do this. Like, that's not me. You meant the person next to me. I stood up, when you shot the arrow of inspiration or whatever, you had to have not mean me.
Yeah.
And so I fought with him for a week. And the next Sunday I go back to church, and he's like, hey, he's like tapping me on the shoulder. He's like, hey, you know what? I still want you to do it. And so I was like, fine. I was like, if that's what you want, like, he's like, okay, well then I want you to go up to your pastor and offer to speak for one Sunday for him. And I was like, you want me to do what? and so I was like, okay. I was like, so I went up to him, and I was like, this is what I feel like I'm supposed to do. And I just laid it all out. Uh, and, and the pastor was like, okay. He's like, I don't know, when or if or how or anything like that, but let's talk, we can talk about it, that type of stuff. Um, Now, let me backtrack just a couple of months, because just a few months prior to all of this, to him giving me this prompting, some friends of mine were kind of, I say they were joking with me, but that's not really I don't think that's really what was happening. I think seeds were being planted, because back in April this year, I became unemployed.
Hmm.
I lost my job unexpectedly, for the second time in 2 years. And so, as I'm sitting here and I'm unemployed, and I'm getting denial letters left and right and up and down and every angle, they're just
Right.
flooding in. My friends are like, you should consider being a pastor. You'd be a really good pastor. And I'm like, no, no, ha ha ha. I'm laughing it off. I'm like, that's not me. That was my dad. That was my dad's dad. That's not me. Um,
Mm.
and so now fast forward a couple of months, and I'm getting this vision. And then God's like, hey, this is what I want you to do. And so during all this time that my friends are joking with me, one of them every now and then will go and speak at a local church here in the area, that is without a pastor. And he's like, you should message them about going and speaking there. And I was like, no, like, I'm not a pastor. I don't speak on churches like that. And I played it off. And after a while, he's like, no, you should really do this. And I was like, fine. So I sent him a message, like, just because I wanted to kind of get my friend off my back, so to speak. And so now here we are, and I'm standing up front, and I'm telling my pastor all this stuff, and we're talking, and he's like, let's talk about this further and all this fun stuff. And I was like, okay. I went home that Sunday, and I was in every normal Sunday, go to bed. Monday morning, I wake up and my phone rings. And it's this church that I had randomly emailed months ago that I had not heard anything from.
Wow.
Because I never expected it, and I never expected to hear anything. They don't know me from Adam, again, they don't know my story. They don't, and it's this church. And like 5-10 minutes later, we're hanging up the phones, and I've got 3 Sundays booked to come and speak at their church.
Whoa.
And I'm like, okay, God, like,
Yeah.
and so I start going to church, and I'm just like, I'm like, okay, like, I'm starting to kind of like mentally wrap my head around this, you know.
Hmm.
And a few weeks go by, and my friend calls me, and he's like, hey, the church that we do CR at, he's like, our pastor just resigned, and the the um the board elder, or the board chair, or whatever his title is, um would like to know if you'd be interested in speaking at our church.
That's so
and,
cool.
and I'm like, okay, like, yeah, if that's, if they're inviting me, I'm happy to come do it. And so now I've, as of this recording, I've spoken there a few times,
Wow.
with more Sundays already scheduled that they've added on to what they've asked. And it's just been this thing, as I've been giving God my yes, doors have been opening. Um,
Yeah.
and and it's all revolving around this addiction that I was so scared to talk about for the longest time. And now I'm able to go in and share my story, and I'm able to share lessons that I've learned over the years, and just be able to help people realize that it's okay to not be okay.
Hmm.
So now I'm sitting here, and it's November, in the middle of November, and um, it's a Wednesday night, and I'm doing some podcast interviews and stuff like that. And I get off the podcast interview for the night, and I hang my headphones up, and I stand up, and God's like, hey, hey. And I'm like, now what? and and he's like, do you remember that podcast idea that I gave you like years ago that you never did anything with? I was like, yeah. He's like, now's the time. And I'm like, God, I'm unemployed. I don't have money for this. Like, podcasts aren't free. There are some costs to do it.
Yeah.
I don't have the money for it. So if you want me to do it, I'll do it. I'm not going to fight you. I know how that ends. Like, but you have to provide. The ball's in your court. Well, if there's one thing I learned, you don't challenge God.
You know.
The next day, Thursday, the very next day, I go to Celebrate Recovery meeting, and one of the leaders walks up to me, and she hands me this envelope. And on the envelope has my name written on it, and it says, "From an anonymous source." I open the envelope up. What's inside? The cash that I needed to be able to pay for the subscription to be able to start my podcast.
Whoa.
And I'm like, okay, got it. I just start I literally just start laughing right there in the spot.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay. So I went home that night and I started my podcast, Unmasked with Wesley Farnsworth. Went home, I signed up, I recorded my introduction, my trailer for the show. And I was like, okay, I recorded it, I put it out there. And I was like, and I've never done a podcast before as a host. I'm like, I don't even know where to find guests. Like, how do I I don't know what to do. And so I was like, you know what? I was like, okay, friends I know, like, who do I know that has those testimonies? Well, I'm in recovery, so I know a lot of people that have testimonies. And so I just started messaging a few of them. And I was like, oh, wait, there's this platform that I'm on that I've reached out to guests. I was like, well, let me go out and look. And sure enough, I created my show on there. And before I know it, I have people just messaging me left and right and up, like from every angle, Facebook, different platforms. And, now I've got 40 plus episodes that I've recorded.
Nice.
That takes me into middle of 2026, and I'm still going like strong. I'm still getting messages every day from people with stories of that have how God has worked in their life. And it's just it's so awesome to see how God is using this testimony, this addiction that I fought so long to get rid of. And he's now bringing it full circle, and he's now using me to be able to share my testimony with others and now give people a platform to be able to share their own testimonies on and help people realize that, you know what, if you're listening to this episode today and you're like, man, that's me. Like I can identify so much with with what you've shared here today, but I don't know where to start, or that sounds awesome, but that can't be me because I've done this or I've done that or, or whatever it is. Well, I want to tell you two things. Okay. If you're telling me that you don't know where to start, the very first thing that I'm going to tell you to do is just take a step. Take a step in the direction of healing. Whether that be uninstalling the browser that or the social media tool that you often find your viewing stuff on, or, or emptying all the bottles in your house that you like to drink, or throwing away all the sweets, if that's what your choice is, whatever it is, just take a step, or maybe it's just reaching out to a friend that's a really good friend, and be like, hey, this has to change. Because I guarantee you, if you feel like something in your life needs to change, the friends that are around you, they already know. They're just waiting for you to come to that realization. They already know that you have a problem because it's probably become pretty evident in one way, shape, or form. But life changes can't happen until you're ready for them to happen, until you've hit your own rock bottom and you've identified that, you know what? I see those rapids coming up ahead in the creek, and I don't want to go through them again. You've hit that rock bottom, and you're like, now I need to get out of the creek.
Yeah.
So take a step and share it with somebody, and just start making small steps. And that's what everything is a small step. It's not a giant leap. You're not going to be able to do it overnight. It's small steps.
Yeah. You mentioned that codependence, and man, I know personally, after you explained what it was clearly, that I put getting sober, I put getting better, I put any recovery to the side because I was more scared about what people might think of me and how I would be titled in this way than I was about myself. I cared more about their kind of like their what they thought more than I cared about myself. And everything changed when I had to flip that. When I had to be like, I'm worth more
Hmm.
than what these people could possibly say. Now, the truth is, these people probably weren't saying anything, but I'd created this world in my mind where I'm like, I can't look this way. I can't do this. I've got to be like right in the middle of the boat, which is really like a survival instinct. You
Yep.
know, it's really good at being part of the herd because we know even in the animal kingdom, the ones that are weak or injured on the outside of the herd, they're the ones that get picked off. So we, in a way, kind of like make ourselves blend in. But what I found in my story is that if you've ever been exposed to like a work situation where like your leader and you're like on a team, I guess, and your leader maybe has traits that you don't agree with, but because you're part of the same squad, you don't push back when either they say something that's not supposed to be said or laugh at something you're not supposed to laugh at. You don't do anything about it or speak up, although that would be your morals speaking out because you want to be part of the group, which is an absolute way to chip away at your own morals. And you come out of it injured, you know? That's crazy what we can do to ourselves. And then when eventually I lost my job and I felt like I had chipped away at my own morals, it was for nothing. So I was mad at myself too, because I had sacrificed myself and my own morals to blend in. So that put a wedge in between me and God because I was like, I'm so sorry. You know what I mean? I chose
Yeah.
the world. You know, I chose wanting to be part of the squad, you know, the cool guy, you know, all that kind of stuff. But it resulted in no equity for me.
Yeah,
Nothing.
well, that's just it. You know, when I first started the addiction, you know, when I that night I went home and looked at the internet, I was like, okay, like, you know, I knew deep down that what I was looking at was not right, but I wanted
Mm,
to fit in with this group of people that I was working with and do it now sharing, you know, life with and being friends with. And so I would kind of let it go, you know, and then over
yeah,
time, I'm like, God, I'm so sorry. I don't want this. But that it already had taken root. And I'm like,
yeah,
oh, and so it just, you know, you really begin to lose who you are um, as you begin to set aside what you think uh, in favor of what you think other people want. You know, as you
yeah.
begin to lose yourself to the point that here within the last couple of years, people will be like, "Hey, what do you think about this?" And I would be like, "I don't know." And they're like, "What do you?
Hmm.
How do you not know?" You know, because I've really started to try to
Right,
fix myself and I wanted to, you know, identify who I was. And I'm like, I don't know. And they're like, how do you not know? And I'd be
right.
like, you know, for the longest time, I've been so worried about sharing with other people what I thought they wanted me to say or
Hmm.
act how I thought other people wanted me to act that
Yep.
I didn't know what I thought. I didn't know how I would naturally act. I didn't know any of that because I hadn't done it in many, 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 many years, like over almost 2 decades.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, I don't know what I think. And
Hmm.
it's still a constant battle today as I began to identify who I am and being able to figure out that and share with people. It's still a
Yeah.
constant struggle because I'm like, hey, what do you think about this? And I have to sit there and it's like I have to take a minute because it's like, okay, is this what I truly think? Or is this what I think they want me to think that they want me to say? And now I'm going to say it. And so I kind of
Yeah.
go back and forth in my head, you know, for several minutes trying to evaluate it and like, okay, you know, and it's a struggle. It really is. And so you do damage yourself. I 100% agree with that. And so and that is a hard battle to overcome. It's taken a lot of counseling, a lot of just working with my
Yeah.
counselor to kind of dig deep and identify some root causes of some things in my life um,
Yep.
and everything just to be able to begin to identify who I am and what I think and how I want to act and do all that.
Hmm.
Um, and so, you know, as I've been sitting here sharing, and I'm sorry, I'm kind of hijacking here. Do you have
No,
anything another? Um,
no, you're
yeah.
going through all of it. It's great. I totally can relate to a lot of what you're saying. Yeah, keep going.
um, And so, I have people tell me all the time, they're like, well, how can you talk so openly now about your addiction? Like,
Hmm.
how can you do it? Like, and aren't you worried about what other people think? And I say, well, honestly, yes, I still am worried about what other people think. But, in recovery, you learn in Celebrate Recovery, we like to say that you can only clean your side of the street. You can't clean other people's. You can't do it
Hmm.
for them. And so as I've been as I've been sharing and stuff like that, I've realized, you know what, I can clean my side of the street. Part of cleaning my side of the street is sharing what I've done, sharing my testimony. Because when God does
Hmm.
something in your life, it's not meant to be kept to yourself. You're supposed to share it with others and help to be able to hopefully help them in their own journey. And
Yeah.
to encourage them if maybe they're sitting here and they're like, I want to do this, but I don't know. Well, maybe sharing my
Hmm.
testimony and sharing my journey will give you that nugget of information that needs to be able to encourage you.
Hmm.
And I tell people, I'm like, I, over the years, I have realized that if I don't talk about something, especially the addiction, the minute I stop talking about it, now it can start kind of slowly sliding back into the shadows of my life, into the
Oh yeah.
darkness. And when it begins to slide back in and it starts to get into that dark corner again, then it starts to be able to fester and get those roots again and become that secret that you don't want to talk about anymore. And you start that
Hmm.
fear starts taking root again and
Hmm.
all these things that you worked so long to defeat. And so I'm like, you know what? I would rather talk about it and keep this thing out in the light
Hmm.
where it's being bombarded in every direction with light, the light and I'm helping other people than to let it go back into the shadows and even risk a potential relapse of any kind and allowing it to
Yeah.
go back because I don't want to go back down that road again.
It
So
was
I would
explained to
rather,
me one Yeah, it was explained to me one time in AA that although, like, you come into AA and you're so down and out, but suddenly the cravings go away, which is like absolute freedom, and you start thinking you can live a normal life and all that kind of stuff. And we remind ourselves that our addiction is basically in the parking lot of the AA clubhouse doing push-ups, just waiting for the moment when like life arrives and it's a situation where it's either sad or even good, something that like just triggers something, a holiday. We got Christmas coming up for a drinker,
yeah,
drug user, or whatever it may be. That's a tough time too because you're going to be around people. It's weird. All right, so like addiction with the things that we're talking about, like let's talk about alcohol, we'll talk about food, we can talk about pornography. The world tells us that these things are okay.
yeah,
That's the problem. Is like the world is saying it's okay, but then your moral spirit, God, your leader, whatever it is, that it doesn't line up the same way. So you almost start doing a evaluation with weight. Well, like my friends do it. People say it's okay. If it's like runs in your family, well, I'm not like them. You know what I mean? So you think you can live in the world and
yeah,
have God too, and it just doesn't end up working out because you're sacrificing yourself. And it's funny. And if we are going to talk about like the enemy, what else would the enemy want you to do but self isolate, be scared, and be shameful?
yep,
I heard recently that like guilt is being sorry for doing something, shame is an identity. And I
yeah,
lived in that identity forever. We can talk about it later, and a lot of people have heard about it already on the show, but I went through some childhood trauma where an adult taught a couple kids an adult game and then told those kids that they were going to hell and that their parents wouldn't love them and all that kind of stuff, and literally said to two 5-year-olds that if I told my dad, who was a police officer, he was going to kill my friend's mom. You know what I mean? So it's like you're dealing it I'm not even sure how I got down that road, but it's like trauma and all this kinds of stuff that we live through. It all kind of creates, um, like for a person who's told that they're not going to be able to go to heaven, that they're not lovable, that they're broken. What do they want? They
yeah,
just want to be loved. They want to
yeah.
know that they're not broken. And you
Well, and
don't
that's
find that by self isolating. You find that by what you said, finding community, living authentically to who you are, and attracting the right people compared to living in a way that's not even you to attract people that maybe you wouldn't even want to be your friends, but would
Yeah.
be socially acceptable, you know? So
Well,
it's,
that I go back to a saying that I often hear my parents say, and I'm sure if you've hearing you probably have heard your parents say this too, or at least somebody. Well, if they jumped off of a bridge, would you do it too? You
right.
know, and so when you think about that, like, yeah, well, okay, if that, yeah, they drink alcohol, or yeah, they drink, or they watch pornography, or yeah, they eat too much, or yeah, they do drugs, or everybody's life is different though. We're all made differently. What's a
Hmm.
problem for one isn't going to be a problem for another. And you have to
Right.
listen to yourself and listen to that inner voice, that conscience, that your higher power, God, telling you, hey, you got to cut this out of your life, because
Hmm.
this is not for who you are. And I have I have people they're like, well, I can do it on my own. I don't need community. And I'm like, okay, let's use this example. It's now, we're recording this episode on December 18th. Okay, so we're approaching the new year. What's the number one thing that everybody does on New Year's? They make a resolution. What's the number one resolution? I'm going to go to the gym and get fit. Okay.
Hmm.
So everybody goes, I'm going to join this gym. I'm going to get fit. I'm going to do this awesome stuff. And they go to the gym and they start working out for a couple of weeks, and like, yeah, see, I can do it myself. Ha, yeah. They start feeling good about themselves and everything. And so they start riding this high. And then, somebody says, hey, can you come do this thing? And they're like, yeah, I can skip the gym one day. And so I go do this one thing. And then this
Hmm.
one thing turns into this other thing, and this other thing turns into another thing. And before
Hmm.
you know it, they're 1, 2, 3, 4 months out, and they haven't gone to the gym a single time in besides those first couple of weeks, because
Right.
they let go of that high and they failed.
Hmm.
Now let's flip that script and add community in there. You join with a friend,
Hmm.
and now you and your friend are like, hey, I want to do this. You want to do this. We're going to meet at the gym every Monday,
Hmm.
Wednesday, Friday, or every Thursday, Friday, or whatever it is. And we're going to keep each other accountable.
Hmm.
And so now you're keeping yourself accountable, and you're saying, hey, I don't want to go, but I also don't want to let Jim Bob over here down. And so
Right.
you go to the gym just because you don't want to let him down. And he's probably going, hey, I don't want to go to the gym, but I don't want to let Larry down. So I'm going to go to the gym. And so now
Yeah.
you start building this community. You have somebody to keep you accountable. You go, you're starting to find success. You're starting to see each other, every day. Your relationship is deepening because you have this thing that you're bonding around. You're
Yep.
meeting new friends at the gym,
Hmm.
and you're starting to build relationships there. And before you know it, you're not, well, you might be addicted to the gym, but
Hmm.
the point is, it's the community
Yeah.
that helps keep you accountable and keep you moving towards your goal. And so, I have people tell me all the time, like, damn, that sounds great, but it doesn't matter because I can't do this. It's not for me. I'm too far gone because I've done X, Y, or Z,
Right.
and I'm like, you know what? If I had a penny for every time I'd heard that, I'd be a rich man, because
Yeah.
it doesn't matter what you've done in your life.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what's been done to you, whether you were abused as a child, or you were, dropped on your head, or it doesn't matter what's been done to you. And it certainly doesn't matter the way you were brought up,
Hmm.
because none of that defines you.
Right.
It plays into who you are. It's a part of your script. I've for whatever reason, I've had several people lately talking about their life as a movie, and so I'm
Hmm.
like, yeah, okay. So whatever you've done in your life, whatever has been done to you, how you were brought up, all that, that's a part of your movie script. But it doesn't
Yeah.
define you, and it doesn't define how your life is going to end. The only thing that defines who you are today is you, and
Yeah.
more importantly, who God says you are. So it
Hmm.
doesn't matter what's been done to you. It doesn't matter what you're addicted to today. It doesn't matter what's happened to you. If you choose to walk in freedom from it, and you choose to want to beat it, and you begin taking those steps, then now you're changing the definition of who you are, and you're showing
Hmm.
others that change is possible,
Yeah.
and you're changing the trajectory of your life. It doesn't, and they're like, well, it's a family problem. My uncle did it, my dad did it, my grandpa did it.
Hmm.
Alcohol is a good one that tends to run the family. It's a family issue. Okay, so let it stop with you. You know, just because it runs in the family doesn't mean that you have to suffer from it too.
Yeah.
You can choose to make it stop with you and take the steps that need to do it. Is it going to be discomfortable or be uncomfortable? Absolutely. Is it going to be hard? Yep. But is it worth it? Yep. And they're like, well, I don't know if people are often like, well, I don't know if I want to do it because, I've had it in my life so long. And I'm like, yeah, you know what? You're absolutely right. You know what life is like with that thing in it. And so you don't know what life is like without it. And it scares you. It's scary. It's scary to want to walk into this new life without this thing that you become so comfortable with in it.
Yeah.
Because you don't know what's waiting for you on the other side. And so that alone will keep people stuck in an addiction. And so I'm like, you know what? Take the steps and remove this thing from your life. Because I guarantee you that if you remove it from your life and you don't like what life looks like without it in it, you know how to get back to the low points that you're in right now. It only takes one decision to be able to get back to where you are today.
Yeah.
But I don't know anybody that's removed something from their life that has wished that they had kept it in there. Because if you want to remove something from your life, it's for a reason. And so just take the step and walk the trip, take the journey, and you're gonna be better for it.
Yeah. Choose you. That was my big problem. I couldn't choose me. I was so stuck in everybody else's kind of like and I totally agree that like for a long period of time, I thought it defined me. I thought I was a police officer who got shot, had PTSD, alcoholic, loser, all that kind of stuff. And that's all that was playing and I'm sure that was the enemy too, like as I've gotten healthier and my spiritual life has become stronger, the more I can notice that it feels like outside influence, negative influence in those moments that were the worst, but there was no one else there. Do you get what I mean?
Yep.
And I don't know if God does that on purpose because those are the moments you're like, if you're there, I need you and you got to show me now. And then things start happening. And your story is a perfect example where it's like one door opens and you kind of walk in, you're like, okay, I'll, I'm riding with you. This is going to be uncomfortable, but I'll do it anyways. And then you do that. And then it turns into something else. And then it turns into something else. And it's just unbelievable how it can like blossom into something that you never would have anticipated.
Yeah. And I have people like, okay, so what are you going to do now? And I look at them square in the eyes and I say, I have no idea. I'm just on this ride. I'm along for the ride right now because I don't know what God's doing. I just know He's opening doors, and I don't know where those doors are going to take me. I don't know what I'm doing in 6 weeks. So I'm just along for the ride, and so that's what I just encourage people to do is just to say yes and remove that thing from their life. Don't let it define them any longer because that's what the enemy wants, and to stop being their own worst critic. I just recorded an episode today for my own podcast where I talk about, sometimes your greatest enemy isn't the outside world, it's the person that's looking back at you when you look in the mirror.
100%.
And, sometimes if we just beat ourselves up and we're like, okay, well, I'm going to change when I get stronger, or I'm going to get changed, or I'm going to change when this happens or when that happens, or, or whatever it is. And so that's just you trying to give yourself permission to stay where you're at because you know that something needs to change, but you don't want to do it. So you're trying to give yourself permission.
Yeah. It's like a well-explained delay. And you even tell it to people and you're like, it makes sense, right? Yeah, that makes sense. I totally get it. It kind of relates to the idea of like, well, when do I start? Now, and that's a hard thing to process because I was very much like, well, it's not Monday, I got to start on a Monday. And then if I got to Monday and I didn't feel like it, I'd be like, well, this isn't the right Monday because it's like the third one in the month. Maybe I get to the first Monday of the next, so I was just hitting a pause button and delaying. And it was more because I was afraid. It wasn't because of anything else. It was because I was afraid.
Absolutely.
I was just scared and people get scared. And we're told to pretend like we don't and that we've got it all together, but that's not the case. And
Yeah.
the more we do these episodes, and I'm sure the more you do your episodes, you see that people have way different walks in life, but we end up in places where we feel like we've lost hope.
Yeah.
And in
Well,
those moments, they're like the biggest seeds to turn into something that's beautiful, like,
and that's just it. Like people are like, well, that's not me because I didn't grow up in the streets. Man, on my own podcast, I've talked to everything from corporate executives to drug dealers. Like, and I've
mhm,
talked and like that have, I've talked to literally everybody from all walks of life. I've talked
mhm,
to people that were born that were told that they weren't going to, they had like a 30% chance to live. I've talked to people that were literally shot and left for dead. I've talked
mhm,
to, people that dealt drugs for 10, 20 years and now have multiple year, 40-year ministry traveling the world speaking, for God. Like I've talked to people from all walks of life, and if there's one common theme is that they all decided that something needed to change.
mhm.
And when they finally admitted and let that change happen, their lives started to get better.
Yeah.
And so I don't care who you are. I don't care, as you're listening to us talk today, like, I don't care who you are. I don't care what you do for a job or if you even have a job, because it doesn't matter.
Mhm.
If something needs to change in your life, can change it.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. Absolutely. I don't think God's going to be too concerned with what our business card says. He's going to be more concerned about what we did while we held that title in
Yep.
his honor. And so you were saying, like, on a daily basis, it gets tough because you're like, what am I supposed to do? And you can get sporadic compared to just being like, I'll do whatever you tell me, Lord. Just,
Yep.
and like coming to terms with that. Um, yeah, it's a
Yeah.
beautiful thing.
God doesn't care about a resume. That's a worldly thing. God doesn't
Yeah.
care about the resume. He looks at the heart.
Yep.
And that's exactly how I'm approaching life right now. Cause I'm like, God, who am I to be speaking on podcasts? Who am I to be speaking on a stage? What have I done that's worth all of this? And he's like, because I
Yeah.
told you to. And so,
Yeah.
like, now I'm opening myself up to speak on Sunday mornings. I'm opening myself up to travel the country and speak on stages and men's groups and
Yeah.
whatever, and just recovery groups or whoever wants to have me share my story. Is anything going to happen from it? I have no idea, but I'm opening the
Well,
door and I'm putting myself out there, and the rest of it's in God's hands. I'm doing what I
yes,
was told to do.
exactly. Exactly. And you have no idea what those words spoken and the ears that hear them may the changes that could create and the thoughts that may create change and all that kind of stuff. And that's the equity. Like, it would be awesome if we cross over into heaven, we get to see how big those trees got. You know what I mean? After
Yeah.
scattering seeds and hoping they hit uh, fertile soil. Yeah,
I
absolutely.
mean, there's no greater reward when we talk about sharing your story. There's no greater reward than sharing your story and have somebody come up to you and tell you that it spoke to them.
Hmm.
I can remember this one time I shared my story. And this was completely spur of the moment, unplanned. Like, somebody else actually shared their story and it's kind of spoke to me. Um, and so I was like, okay. And so I raised my hand and I shared my story. And that led to this complete stranger, never met him before in my entire life, come up to me like, "Hey, can we talk?"
Hmm.
And I was like, "Okay." So we excused ourselves from the room, went out and talked. And he just was like, "Dude," he's like, "You just told my story." He's like,
Hmm.
I need help." And so right there
Yeah.
and then I was able to help him, because you never know where sharing your story, what it's going to do for somebody.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
but to get there, you have to take that first step.
Yeah. Yeah. It's I like the saying that, like, all that fear that you're feeling that's keeping you in the place, it looks like it's, a mile deep, that big lake in front of you, but the truth is it's only an inch. It's like if you were to step out in the water and suddenly be standing on it, you're like, oh, I can do this,
Yeah.
and compared to just sinking like a stone. And that's what it feels like a lot of the times. It's funny how we hold ourselves back.
Yep.
Well, sir, it has been an absolute pleasure speaking with you. Let's set it up so I can be on your podcast as well, so we can help more people. Um, and I really appreciate you sharing your story, and especially how you've grown through it. You know, those steps that it took. It's going to help a lot of people. And besides that, sir, God bless.
God bless you, man. Thanks for having me, Cam.
A massive thank you to Wesley for his vulnerability today. It's a huge reminder that while isolation feeds shame, community starves it. So your past, no matter what it looks like, does not define your future. And as Wesley said, God cares way more about your heart than your resume. If today's episode hit home for you, or if you're navigating your own recovery journey, please reach out. You don't have to paddle through this creek alone. Don't forget to subscribe, leave us a review, and share this with someone who might need to hear that they too can change their stars. We'll see you next time on Shit Creek Survivors.